Oh, this is our coaching call for the 17th of February. It's going so fast. It's going so fast. I can't wait for March because then the snow is over. You know, I literally document all the snowfalls. This is snowfall number 6 for this year. So we are continuing with the protocol. Today, we're talking about data management and how to, managing data with the protocol. And then we're talking about further use of the wheel. Last week, we talked about in the sense of getting rich, how to use the wheel. Now it's further use of the wheel. Okay, Rockstar. So the protocol, really always bearing in mind that you're looking at an operation. The protocol is two worlds meshed together, the operational and the clinical. Well, operational is how do we go about doing this project or the study? What are the things that we need, the tools, the resources? And then the clinical side is really more the, in-depth, what is the constitution of the product, the rationale for dosing, anything that really has to do with scientific data and clinical data. Okay, so I talked about the protocol always having a purpose and a vision. It always ties into a greater portfolio at every pharmaceutical company. So if you go to website, you look at a company, that pipeline, you might see a pipeline for metabolic disorders, GI disorders, but within that, then you have all the various programs and then all the various projects and all the various protocols. So that always ties in. And then the main focus as a CRA, QA, or QC person, you're always looking at from a strategic perspective. It's really looking at the deviations from the protocol, right? Making sure that we're conducting everything within the parameters of what has been stipulated in the protocol. Now, Elizabeth said she has LSV coming on, last subject visit. And so last subject visit is always an opportunity to go look at the data, reconciliation, right? Last subject visit is like you're looking at reconciliation. You really have to start proactively working on the things that are going to come up during the database lock. I say as soon as you project that LSV, start looking at everything. Protocol deviations that have actually occurred, if they've been documented properly, accountability of IP, is all the IP accounted for? I mean, just start doing your review, start looking at the logs, just act like you're about to log. You're about to do your study closeout. You look at IP, look at safety events, adverse events, serious adverse events, and then other things that have occurred throughout the course of the study. Maybe there were some deviations that had to be documented in a specific way. Start looking at that. And then you always want to make sure that, those queries that are in the system, you don't want to look at your aged queries. Those queries that have been sitting around and maybe there have been some questions that have been asked and it's just been dragging. LSV, just start cleaning up as soon as you can. Because from LSV to database lock, once that last subject visit happens, then you guys know how it goes. It just goes crazy. It's like, we have to start cleaning. So I just say, just be proactive and start cleaning everything. Look at the regulatory binder. Is it up to date? Has everything been filed? So that way, once your data is clean and all the parameters have actually been closed up, right? You're closing the loop. You started from FSV, first subject visit, LSV, database lock, right? So you want to make sure that, you're looking at queries, you're looking at just the study overall. What can we do right now as this last subject exits that is going to really cause us to have a smooth database lock? Okay, so that's that. But that's your perspective, right? You're always looking objectively, but you're also looking subjectively. Objectively, the whole purpose and what the timelines are. So for this, LSV is a major timeline. And then per site, because at the global level, I'm looking at LSV at the last country, the last site, but at your site, LSV is LSV. I mean, at your facility. Okay, so we are going to talk about ethics today, and I won't go into too much detail because we know that our industry is so highly regulated, you guys, and we know why. We're dealing with human beings. We're dealing with patients. We're dealing with people who could be our brother, our sister, a friend, an acquaintance. And so we have to make sure that, the use of ethical considerations. We cannot do anything that's going to jeopardize the patient. I heard this story about a German company that had camped somewhere. I think it's in Kenya. Or is it in Tanzania? I'm trying to remember. In the bush. And they were recruiting patients for a project and nobody knew about it. They were not obtaining any informed consent, right? I mean, just basically putting these patients through clinical trials without letting anybody know. But what is so fascinating is that, guys, the ethics in clinical trials, sometimes it can be very subtle, and sometimes it's hard to notice. Let me give an example. Say you're at a facility where it's a high enrolling facility. This investigator is well known. The pharmaceutical companies just love him. I've had some of those, not key opinion leaders, my high enrollers, because sometimes KOLs do not enroll. They're just there because we need them in order to file, right? They're there because they have clout, they've published all kinds of stuff and they're the leading authority in that field. But your high enrolling side, and so say you're at that facility and maybe there's some patients that had some out of window visits. Yes, maybe the IRB doesn't require that you record it, but maybe there was this one patient who had out of window visits to the point where it's skewing the data. But high enroller, the sponsor company doesn't say anything. You guys don't really document it, and maybe the CRA or the Q and QC person doesn't actually catch it. So those are some of the ethical things, right? It's about always saying, am I putting this patient first or am I putting the clinical trial first? That's really what it boils down to. Does data come first or does the patient come first? Okay, so those are things that we want to look at. And always remember that ultimately you are responsible for your patients. Pharmaceutical companies, and when I say that's where I say there is a tendency to want data so much, especially smaller companies that have a very small pipeline. There's a lot of pressure involved, but always remember that, ethical considerations come first. You can't per the declarations of Helsinki, right? The Declaration of Helsinki, that's where all the ethical considerations for clinical trials actually stem from. I'm putting patients' rights first and safety and all of that stuff. Then let's talk about data handling and record keeping. Huge in clinical trials, huge. The first thing I want us to think about is that data that is being collected on source documents, it's being collected, in the databases, whether it's the EDC, electronic data capture, it's being collected in the IRT system, the interactive response system, or IWRS, interactive web response system. It's being collected just think about all the data in a clinical trial, how it has to be handled. And the method of handling, of course, varies per the method in which it is actually documented. So when we talk about EDC, we enter everything into EDC. We absolutely want to make sure that whatever we're entering into that system is actually accurate, right? And hence we have queries. Hence we can't catch every single query. Hence the system will have queries that come up, and that way you can keep correcting them. But then the most important thing is that the data that is being entered on the source documents, they always say it's attributable. You can attribute it to the person who actually wrote it. It's legible. That's obvious. You can see it. It's not like little scribbles. And that's why we always recommend writing with a black pen, right? Versus a pencil, a black pen. Contemporaneous, it's up to date. That means that it just happened, right? It's the data that has just been captured. It's original. It is the source data, right? It's original data that has been captured, and it has to be accurate. But and complete, of course, we have to have it complete. But here's the thing about this. It's called ALCOA-C now. It used to be just ALCOA, and then they added and complete. So now it's ALCOA-C, and there are two more. I can't remember what it is. There's two more that has been added recently. I was doing a training recently, and I think there's two more letters that I noticed were added. But the bottom line is this. Rule of thumb, you don't want to scratch anything. And you guys know this, as Q and QC people, you always line through initial and date. You have to, because that is what the audit trail. In a database, the audit trail is easy. I go in, I put in my password, I do some work, it captures everything. But it's more challenging when it's a piece of paper. Okay, so that's what the audit trail is. I make sure that, the data is accurate, it's original. But the most important thing we all know that is that whatever corrections that are actually made, they really have to be line through initial and dated, right? Line through initial date. That's really important. And then you want the data, the source data, to be traceable. Okay. So it doesn't matter how many times you line through initial, how many errors, so long as you can trace the beginning. So you're looking at, if I look at source documents and their corrections, I want to take a look at where the corrections started, that the corrections are actually original, right? And that whoever made the corrections is actually documented. And there's a rationale for the corrections that are being made. That's really it. And they talk about, yeah, of course, the audit trail. Again, clinical trials are changing. I mean, everything is now basically database driven. But the other thing that we want to think about is that the documents have to be accurately maintained. And that's something that is interesting, because I have to tell you guys, I remember I was monitoring for Novo Nordisk way back when I was a CRA. It's been a long time. And there was this one facility where one principal investigator apparently had with a sub-investigator, and then the documents just moved around. That was a hassle. We had to find them. We had to figure it out. Most of the records are not even complete, and they were not accurately being maintained. So there was like some patients chart. I have never seen anything like that. There were like drops of stuff in it. But these people, that was their first clinical trial. They didn't understand the industry, clueless. And so it really took a while to get all these data back together, review it, transfer it to the new investigator, and then remonitor every single thing. And so I remember that so well. So we really want to make sure that, even if oil drops on something, which can happen, water drops on it, just make sure that, you can still see the data. And we cannot then, if you have to transcribe it, you of course have to explain that the reason for the transcription is because there was some water that dropped on it. That's really it. That's just what I wanted to just talk about. It's knowing that this data in clinical trials, think about it, is the data from the clinical research side that goes to the FDA or any regulatory body, the EMR, the PMDA, all those around the world, Health Canada. But it's that data that goes. And so the clinical research side, I always say, is the most important piece of clinical trials. And so you guys working as QA, QC people, extremely important, because you have first-hand look at that data, and the product, whether it's going to be approved, whether it's going to help people, it depends on you. I would say, site personnel, CRAs, you are the ones who have first dibs. You look at it, you know what errors there are. And so you're no longer just, I'm just conducting a clinical trial or I'm monitoring a clinical trial. But me as Lizette, as Elizabeth, as the person who's looking at this data, who's making sure that it's captured properly, who's managing this clinical trial at the facility, I'm the most important piece in the whole of everything. That is the truth. Not even the principal investigator, because, he delegates authority, right? He delegates duties, not authority. He's always responsible. But you at the facility, I, as a project manager, to be honest with you, project managers are always needed because, it's a skill set that is rare in this industry. I mean, it's there, but you guys know what I mean. It's, you got to actually work. We're always needed globally. We need consultants. But here's the truth. If the data from the clinical research side is skewed and there are issues, I can manage the project and do whatever I'm doing. It doesn't mean anything, because guess what? Things are incorrect, right? And so it's just so important what you guys are doing. Like it's the most important thing that happens in the clinical trials industry. CRAs, site personnel, those two, the site personnel come first. Then the second set of eyes are CRAs. Then of course we have QA, QC people, we have, auditors and all of that stuff. But it is your work is the work that causes products to be approved. Products that came to the market, when I got this, I treated my sites like gold. Even till this, they have sites who still say, "Oh, Tengu, I wish you could be a monitor again." I don't plan to, because I've done it. But, I have great relationships with them, because I've said, these are the people who cause products to be approved. It's them. They are the ones who see the patients. They're capturing the data. They're the ones doing the quality control, quality assurance. It starts with them. Without them, no products will come to the market. No products will come. So I treated study coordinators, QA. I mean, like gold. I used to bring gifts. Now with the sunshine laws, a little bit different, but I still bought gifts. I still bought gifts. Yeah, absolutely. So what you guys do is so important. You basically bring products to the market. But of course, nobody wants to talk about this, right? Because we live in a world where it's all about the airy fairy stuff, right? It's like when you hear about the COVID vaccines, did you guys hear about the clinical research sites, the project managers, the CRAs, right? We don't hear about it, right? Because we live in a world where it's all the high level stuff, the people who have the, hey, I was watching how this the VP at Pfizer was speaking, and I said, who should be speaking? It should be somebody at a clinical research site who actually enrolled. He was just, but that's the world we live in. We forget about the people who are actually doing the work, and then we just, we go up. But so data is important, but the work that you do is so important in terms of capturing this data, QCing it, ensuring that it is, it meets all it meets Alcoa C. But also we talk about when we say data handling, but we also want to make sure that all the supporting documentation, right? The regulatory stuff. So data, all the supporting documentation, because regulatory documents support the data. We want to make sure that it's all complete. So I know many times when people, study this part of the ICS GCPs, they say data handling and record keeping, right? The data handling part tends to get more cloud, but keeping records that also support all this data is also very essential to the success of the clinical trial. Okay, any questions, rock stars? Any observations? Quiet today, you rock stars. Quiet. Okay, so financing and insurance. I'm just on a practical level. Every country is different. So there are some countries where this pharmaceutical company provides insurance, right? For the patients who are in the trial, they provide indemnification insurance and all of that for the clinical research side. And they also, the financing piece, of course, the project is being financed by the sponsor. So when in terms of insurance, it's just different. And here in the US, some institutions don't require insurance, hospitals, big institutions, because they already have that incorporated. In Canada, it's already like it's part of it. So every country is different. I think Japan is the same way. Clinical research sites, they don't pay for their insurance independently. They pay for it, sorry, it's actually woven in. So it all varies, but just be aware of the type of insurance, what the requirements are. You just want to be aware of it. This doesn't apply, it doesn't really matter, but it's just something that one has to be aware of, the financing piece is easy. We're financing the clinical trial, we're financing the stipends that go to patients, should there be stipends. We are financing if they're local advertising campaigns, so basically financing the whole clinical trial. Yeah, so that has to be stipulated. I mean, that comes through contracts, scope of works, in the informed consent payments to patients. I mean, the financing is all woven into the clinical trial. And for my part, what I focus on are the grants, non-grants, pass-through costs, per country. That's typically what I focus on. I work with finance to make sure that I would know all of this. I'll know all the insurance requirements, all the financing, what the main study budget, it runs to millions of dollars, what it is, and all of that stuff. But at the level of the clinical research side, it's just something that you're aware of. Indemnification insurance. Who is it, the sponsor that's carrying it, or is it us that pays for it? And that varies per country. Of course, publication policy, it's normal in clinical trials. Anything that has to be published, we have to inform the pharmaceutical company. And typically it's the PIs who publish it. There are a lot of PIs who sit on these clinical trials because, they will need data for some paper that they are writing. And then, of course, there are publications that are done in conjunction with the pharmaceutical company or the sponsor. And those are often really neat. And these KOLs will publish what has happened so far and and it's often needed, and that's well coordinated. But if you're going to publish independently, they need to get permission from the pharmaceutical company. And that's always stipulated when they publish, we set up an agreement and what the parameters are, and all of that stuff. So that's really what that is about. Okay, so that's our protocol for today. Let me open up the protocol that we're looking at, and let's go to, I thought I had this already, to the spot, to the data requirements spot. Where was it? The study design. Those are all the tables. Financial disclosure, data handling. So study monitoring, auditing, and documentation. This is where this will fall. So we'll go here. So it talks about, this is all the data piece, right? In this project, the study sites will have sites visits, telephone contact. Then it talks about source records and how they're supposed to maintain it. Then we go to confidentiality. And then we go to cost to participants. That's a financing piece, right? You see, guys, see how it flows. It doesn't exactly flow like the ICA GCPs. It could be broken down into different sections. Cost to participants, compensation for study-related injury, insurance, right? And then, of course, record retention and publication policy. So if we're looking at your protocol, those sections might, extend across several pages, but really broken down in a way that everybody can understand, because the whole point is that we absolutely do not want anything that is vague. So when you look at whatever protocol that you're working on, you can, I know when we do this now, you guys probably go back and check out your protocols in a whole different way. So that's it. The publication policy, this is a long one, and all of that. But then outside of this, should a PI contact me and say, hey, Tengu, we want to do do a publication, we have some research work and blah, blah, blah. Then I have to review the parameters, and then we have to look at the kind of relationship, that is it a contractual relationship, but there's a lot involved. And then there's a whole team that takes care of that. So that's always good. Okay, so let's go back to perfect. The science of getting rich, further use of the wheel. I always talk about thinkonomics. There is no economy but the economy of thought. Thinkonomics. Okay. Last week, we talked about how to use the wheel, that you're not pressuring people. You're not focusing on people, you're focusing on yourself, and you're using yourself to form the mental image of what you desire in your life. And you do it in a continuous way. And to do that, the minds and people will start moving to bring what has to come towards you. So the main takeaway was that we're not forcing our thoughts on people. We're thinking about what we want. And then that basically then starts moving forward in our lives. And doubt and unbelief interrupts the flow. And guys, it is so true. I have to tell you, I always catch myself because I might say, oh, wow, I'm so happy and grateful that, some things that I'm desiring will happen today. And then I start hearing some lack thoughts as I'm moving throughout the day. And I'm like, no, this is not in alignment with what I actually want. So I always have to remember, that back and forth is what causes things not to manifest. And we also talked about don't focus on the poverty of other people, because you can't get poor enough to help to make poor people rich. That is the truth. And when I say poor people, I'm not talking only about money. I'm talking about the way people think. Because anybody who has limited resources on this planet, I know that there are certain places where people have few, but we've seen it. We know that no matter where you are, if you practice this stuff, you will move forward. And that is the truth. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. I think Elizabeth dropped off. Lizette, she'll come back. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, right? Because the ultimate thing is how you think. That's the only thing that matters. Yes, when I say this, sometimes they would say, but there are people who have struggling conditions, and there are people, if they had this information, they wouldn't be in those struggling conditions, right? I mean, if they did, but it happens that they don't do. So the poverty that people have is not so much the lack of resources, that they are not aware of the resources that this universe has created for them. That's the thing that I always remind myself of. It's not so much that there's poverty. Nobody is taking anything from anybody, because once you get this knowledge, and it has transformed my life. And here's the thing: no matter what challenge I face, that's what gets me. When I was building this business, you know how it was. I mean, when I started, it was just up and down. I had so much going on, and then I'm also, I also consult. That's the other part of the business. So there were so many challenges, but I knew in my heart that there is no lack. There was only lack if I believe that there was lack. So that's the thing that I want to talk about. It's not that we're not gonna, I don't want to pity poor people. You want to actually get these concepts in your mind, because as a result of who you're becoming, like you, Elizabeth, what has been happening with your life, people are gonna look at you and they're gonna say, "Oh my goodness, I want to be like her." That's how you stop poverty. You don't stop it by going to join up with people and complain, because it's not going to change anything. I know it's at first I'm like, that's harsh. No, it's not, because right now, and that's why you see on the everything that I do, it's for upliftment. And I talk about risks, so I talk about challenges, what we're going through. But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter what's happening in your life, all is economics. That's the truth. When you actually believe that I am a center of divine operations, and that every single person is a center of divine operations, then everything is possible. Yes, that's the truth. The only gift that we can give to people is to show them how to fish, right? Versus giving them the fish. It's the only gift. There is nothing else. I've had situations where you've been there, right? You help people, you come back 1 year later, they're back to where they were before. Give them the knowledge. Don't give them the knowledge of how to help themselves versus helping them. So I talked about you're not showing hardness of heart. Keep your mind off poverty. Think about abundance. Keep the faith of the vision of what you want, and don't settle for anything else. Further use of the will. Okay. So what Wallace D. Wattles does here is expands more of the will, because this will is so important. I think this will is the bedrock for his book, because the will we're talking about is that discipline of the mind and the spirit to get past the obstacles and limitations that we've set for ourselves, because nobody set them. We are the ones who do. We are the creation, and we are the creator, right? So he talks about focus on the desires, not opposing ideas. And so we're looking at two ends of a stick. Remember, I talk about what I want and what I don't want. It's two ends of the stick. You just have to focus on whatever you want. And he says that you want to move forward from the past. And whenever I read this, and I read this book, The Science of Getting Rich, every single day, when I come to this point, I get emotional, because I know what it's like. We can use the past and excuse as our excuse not to move forward. I have most certainly fallen on my face. I have been through so many challenges, like everybody has. But the one thing that I'm very clear about is that the past, I bless it, because it's because of the past that I am where I am today. And so he says that you have to accept a new hypothesis for your life. What is the premise? I'm a center of divine operations. I keep talking about that call because I did it on the Facebook Live. If the premise is that I'm a center of divine operations, then why do I have to dwell on the contrary? If it is true, and I really believe it, that I'm a center of divine operations, then I'm not going to think about lack or limitation, because I know that so long as I'm a center of divine operations, what might seem like challenges, lack, limitation in my life is the passage through which the divine operations are working. But in my mind, I'm thinking I'm suffering, but it's a gateway. So why dwell on the means to your good, right? Versus the good. The means doesn't matter to this universe. I mean, you're shaped and it doesn't really matter. He talks about do not participate in doomsday conversations about the world. Elizabeth, I have to tell you, and Lizette, I know she's going to be listening to this. I don't watch anything that is bad news. I don't watch. I don't even have a television. What I have are streaming services where I get to select what I want to watch. There, I don't watch the news. The only news that I'm obsessed with right now is it's CNN Africa, and they show all these different, entrepreneurs. Now, I just watched one on this group that is in Nairobi, and it inspires me because that's something that I'm really passionate about. You know what these tech startups are actually doing. That's what I enjoy. I don't watch the news because guess what? I always say the joke that if the world is coming to an end, my mother's going to tell me. She is involved with it. She can tell you the news Right now, she knows what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, name a country. She's going to tell you what's happening in that country. And she speaks like, I don't know, 20 languages. So she's going to tell me if the world is coming to an end, she's going to call me and say, hey, do you know the world is coming to an end? I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So why dwell on it? And especially here in the US, where the news, I say, is fabricated. These people have to get people's attention. They make up all kinds of stories. When I was in Canada and I would go back and forth, the news in Canada is about the different countries, uplifting news. Come here, it's all sensation. So the news is not. And then the other thing is that from a logical perspective, they're reporting on something that has happened. They're making up a story on something that has happened based on the perception of the people that it happened to. So when they interview people, you see those interviews where they talk to one person, the person says a different story. They talk to another person, the person. So don't watch that. These are unwanted conditions. They are limited. They are things that have already passed. So why dwell on them? I mean, really, I always remind myself, I'm like, I don't need to dwell. Why dwell on them? There's nothing that you can do that's going to change them. So that and create something new for yourself. Now, here's the part that Wallace D. Waters talks about. He's like, you got to think about the world getting richer rather than the poverty is going out of. And when I heard this, I swear, Elizabeth, I had like chills because it seems easy, but we often think about the poverty that the world, like we say, oh, the poverty in the world is finishing, but you're still focusing on poverty. You want to say, oh, the world is getting richer. Because if you say if you meet somebody and say, oh, my goodness, Susan was doing really well. And all of a sudden, some things started changing in her life. And now she's getting out of the condition. You're still focusing on that condition. But if you say, oh, Susan is doing very well now, she's getting richer, she's getting healthier, then that's a whole different ballgame. And then again, he talks about staying away from the competitive plane, the mad scramble forward, cutting people off. And you want to always work in the creative plane because that's where intelligent substance works. It's not competing with anything. Then the one thing that he talks about, people who go see the soothsayers and all that stuff, I know that there are horoscopes and things, but he talks about postponing your investigations into the occult. Occult is witchcraft, all of that stuff. It doesn't mean that it's not important because we have that culture, I find, on the African continent. I mean, there's a need for it. There is healing. There's all of that. But what he's saying is that let nobody tell you that, you were born and that because you come from a certain area that you're not supposed to progress in life. Or that because, we have some stuff on our continent, because your grandfather was a whatever and that bad luck has flown through and now you're not going to progress in life. That's what he's saying. Yes. And then don't dwell on dead people and dead thoughts. That's what I say. He means that he says that leave the dead alone. Leave them alone, they've done what they're supposed to do and they've left this planet. So leave the dead alone. Do not focus on them. That's none of your business anymore. That's what he says. So leave the dead alone and focus on getting wealthy because, there are people who focus on seeing spirits. I'm sure that they're there. Of course, everything is possible, right? We are in a universe that we're only getting to understand. I believe that people don't die. But why focus on dead people, right? When there's so many people living that I can actually focus on. Okay, so this is my quote, which I love. I had to write it. And Elizabeth, again, we're a little bit behind with stuff. We're going to be uploading all these slides in the next, by mid-March, it should be up to date. So much work. So we will catch up. But and then starting mid-March, nothing is going to be behind because there's a lot I had to generate a lot just to get all the support and help that I needed. So here's the quote. Wherever the spirits of the dead may be, they have their own work to do and their own problems to solve. And we have no right to interfere with them. We cannot help them, and it is doubtful whether they can help us or whether we have any right to trespass upon their time if they can. Let the dead and the hereafter alone. Leave the dead and the hereafter alone and solve your own problems. Get rich. I'll change that to leave. Oh, excuse me, Miss Elizabeth, look at what I just did. Leave the dead and the hereafter. That's what he says. Leave them alone. Focus on yourself. Yes, because there are people who spend their whole days, trying to see spirits, and that, the spirit of my brother will come and make me weak. It doesn't work that way. So the next one is acting in a certain way. And the key is that our thought plus inspired action is the key. Thinkonomics plus inspiration and emotion, that is the key. So the big takeaway today. We talked about our protocol from what? We talked about ethical considerations in clinical trials. We talked about data handling and record keeping, extremely important. And then we talked about financing and insurance, right? And publication policy. And then, of course, in the sense of getting rich, it's further use of the will, the important will. We need the will to shape our desires because discipline comes from the will. The will is not to go out and push anybody to do anything. The will is me focusing on the riches that are within me and so that energy come into the world and transform other people's lives. And I don't have to go out and do anything. I just have to sit in the comfort of my mind. Elizabeth, I have to tell you this. And I will keep repeating it. This stuff works. I cannot tell you the things that have happened just from January to now. I literally sit and visualize. When something happens, like I have a challenge, I just sit. I arrange my little table, my cushions, and I just sit. And I say, Tengo, what is the outcome that you want from this situation? And I do it over and over and over again. And then I write about it, and then it's done. It is done. It doesn't mean that, like I have had some magical things have just happened in the past 2 to 3 weeks. Like I said, I'm just going through a phase of, it's called momentum. I've built so much momentum right now where things are moving forward. I had some delays, with Omicron. I had some delays in projects that I've bidded for that I was supposed to take on. And then also this CRA portal I'm working on, but also the Facebook Live. But Elizabeth, we're now going to start an advertising campaign like and then I'm also studying. I'm from March 15, I start studying to become a financial analyst for healthcare professionals and clinical research professionals. And they're going to be launching my business in April. It's a global thing because I'm going to start now talking about the importance of money as part of our group. So there are so many things that are going on and there are many moving pieces. And I'm sure that, you and Lizette, we all go through stuff. But the fact of the matter is that nobody can stop what you believe. And when you sit and visualize that outcome, I wrote a list of maybe about 20 things that I wanted to accomplish between now and September. I'm already halfway through and I just keep checking them because that's my only focus. The only thing I think about is how can I today give of myself in a way that I've never given of myself, and on Thursday, it's coaching. It's how can I make sure that, you guys get the best of the best of the best. So that's what it's about. When you have that overwhelming desire to contribute and then you only visualize, see, there's an inner sense. I had a discussion the other day, I forgot what they said, we have to have an inner sense like a child that is playful. Don't get caught up with the things of this world because at the end of the day, they will pass, right? So the focus is what can I ask Elizabeth Ambulili right now? Ambululi. I always say Ambulili because I like the way it sounds. It's Ambululi. Luli. So what can I right now in my life focus on? Right now, today, what are the 3 most important things that I want to occur in my life? What are the 3 most important things? What are the 3 most important things that I want to accomplish? And let me give you an example. It doesn't have to be like I like to say, I want to attract more clients. I want to, have more people join coaching, more people join the other things that I'm doing. But then the second thing is always what I want to, well, it's not second, but it's always 3 things. I want to serve in a way that I've never served before. And I want to have fun doing it. So when you create the 3 most important things, always make sure that you include something like I want to be happy today. I want to be joyful. I want to love what I'm doing. And then you can put 2 actions like things that you want to accomplish today. And then you give gratitude for them. and you focus, you use your will. Don't focus on what's going on. People running around and doing all kinds of silly stuff has nothing to do with you. Because the reason why you have this overwhelming desire within you to move forward in life, to be a better person, is because you're meant to be that better person. That's why it's there. We all have different goals in life. So that's what it's about. Focus, you use the will, and you don't look back, no matter what happens. Okay, Elizabeth. Those are my thoughts for today. And I'll end here.